speaker. Our next speaker is Ed Haslam. By show of hands, how many of you know who Ed Haslam is? Ed Haslam, as many of you know, is the author of Dr. Mary's Monkey. What you may or may not know is that he's also the person who basically edited Me and Lee. He's the one that vetted Judyth Vary Baker for CBS on their 60 Minutes program. He was a New Orleans native. CBS was looking for someone to vet her story to see if there was any credibility there. And after a lot of vetting, he determined that Judyth Vary Baker was the real deal. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to bring up Ed.
Hey, it's Ed. You have screen sharing disabled. Okay, thank you.
Ending. What? Not yet.
Hello. This is Ed. Hello, this is Ed.
Hi, Ed. Go ahead.
Hey there, can you all hear me?
Hey, Ed, we have you.
Can you see me?
No, we cannot see you. You need to start your video.
Can you see me now?
We see you.
You are not at the beach.
Well, I'm in Bradenton, Florida, and this is live, so here I am.
Our bed's on fire.
So let me know when you want me to start.
Ready anytime you are.
Let her roll.
Okay. Let me see here. Oops, my intention is. Oh, where are you? Give me a second. I've been practicing this all day. It ought to work. Okay, can you see two books each side of me?
No, sir.
Nope. Okay, well, let's get back to screen sharing. Now, I think Zoom is going to be the greatest contribution to the internet since, I don't know what, YouTube or something, but it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. I'm clicking buttons over here. You can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, so all we got to do is get the Zoom video going here.
Is there a way to remove the buzz?
The what?
Ed, say something so we can hear you and test the volume.
Okay, I'm here, and I'm trying to get this to show on your screen. The theory is I've got a PowerPoint here that I'm looking at on the screen that has all the information about the timeline that I am trying to share with you. And the last I looked, it told me, the Zoom thing told me that I'm going to disconnect from Zoom and reconnect. If you'll just bear with me a moment, I've been doing this all afternoon, so it should be pretty efficient. I'll be right back.
Turn my mute on.
I can still hear
You're
you.
mute.
Can you still hear me? Return to meeting. Okay, I'm seeing the empty speakers podium here. And I see myself up there on the box. And I see Peter's thing. Can you all say hi? So I know you're there.
Peter's here. Do you hear me?
Yep. Can you see the two
Okay,
books?
there you go. There you go. We got your PowerPoint.
Okay, good. Let me begin then. First of all, thank you for having me here. I just don't travel anymore. But I do share a commitment to exonerating Lee, which I think he needs to be exonerated. And as you see here, I am the author of Dr. Mary's Monkey. And since you can't read that, I'll read it for you. How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a secret laboratory in New Orleans, and cancer-causing monkey viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics. And I also am the senior editor of Me and Lee, How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald, which is Judyth's autobiography, which she's been explaining to you, and of which I wrote the foreword, and my friend Jim Mars wrote the afterwards. Jim also, if you see here, also wrote the foreword to my book. This, for 30 years, I've been focused on the unsolved murder of Dr. Mary Sherman. She was an MD from the University of Chicago. She was an orthopedic surgeon, and she was an expert in cancer and radiation. And what do I mean by expert? Well, she wrote articles for peer-reviewed journals in the cancer category and in the radiation category, and her articles were quoted for 3 decades, okay? She was also a professor to a medical school where she taught with my father. He knew her well. She came out to our house one night. I sat on her lap. That makes me an expert, you know. And she was a partner at Oschner Clinic. We'll be talking a lot about Dr. Oschner in this presentation, where she ran a bone cancer lab. She died in NOLA, which is New Orleans, Louisiana, July 21st, 1964. So that's been my focus all this time. And that focus led me to Judyth Vary Baker in NOLA in the summer of 1963, which is all explained in this wonderful book, in which she explains her relationship with Mary Sherman, who was essentially the medical supervisor of the project she was working on. And that led me to Lee Harvey Oswald, which is why I'm here with you this afternoon. Because he also knew Mary Sherman, and it was in Mary Sherman's apartment and was part of the operation, which we'll talk about more soon, okay? Why is this important? I think this is important because the more you know about what Lee did in NOLA during the summer of '63, the more you'll understand what he did and did not do in Dallas in 1963. I don't think you can understand Lee in Dallas unless you understand Lee in New Orleans. All right, so in Dallas, just so I've said this clearly once and up front, I don't think Lee killed Kennedy. He was on the second floor lunchroom at the time, in my opinion. He did not kill Tippit. He was already in the movie theater. He tried to stop the JFK assassination. He was told he was part of an abort team. He stayed in position until the end, and then he was framed as a patsy. That's my take on Lee in Dallas. Now, there's Lee with Captain Westbrook, who I think should have been hung up by his heels, but he was a CIA asset in the Dallas Police Department, who soon became the advisor to the Saigon Police Department in Vietnam in 1964. Okay, they got him out of town and put him in a real cozy position. This is about Lee's Summer of Secrets, right? In New Orleans in 1963, all right? We find Lee between Judyth and Alton Ochsner, between David Ferrie and Mary Sherman, with Guy Bannister, ex-FBI agent with CIA contacts, and Clay Shaw, the director of the international, or not director, but the general manager of the International Trade Mart. All these people are trying to present Lee as a communist. Why? Because they want to kill Castro or maybe JFK. All right, so this is the Summer of Secrets graphic timeline, which I consider my contribution to this discussion of Lee. He comes into town April 25th and he leaves at September 25th. That is 5 months, okay? His work at Riley Coffee Company is documented. It's in the Warren Report, et cetera. And he starts on May 10th and ends on July 19th, all right? Then there are all these political things that happen in August, which we'll talk about more, all right? Then he goes home and sits on his porch in flip-flops and reads books until he goes to Mexico. Now, the Warren Commission looks at this and concludes Lee was a lone nut, a communist, an incompetent worker, an irresponsible father, a traitor and defector, and he fits the profile of an assassin. Therefore, he is guilty of killing JFK based on evidence that was handpicked by J. Edgar Hoover. All the Warren Commission was, which was a junta, as I told David Denton a while back, was a confirmation of J. Edgar Hoover's fabrication of what happened in Dallas, all right? There are 3 points of time here that have not been looked into, and we're going to look into them today. And we're also going to look into some of these other things in more detail than ever been looked into before. But I only have an hour here, right? But I have 20 hours of free videos. I'm not asking for any money. I don't even have a Patreon account. 20 hours of free videos on drmarysmonkey.com. Just remember to spell out the word doctor, okay? Now, Lee's Summer of Secrets starts on April 25th, where he takes a bus down from Dallas, okay? After 10 years, nearly 10 years of not being in New Orleans, he returns to New Orleans and goes straight to Lee Circle, that's on the left, and checks into the YMCA on the right. Now, that's my office right there, because I used to work in that office, you know, and that was across the street. So I know this area pretty well. And the next day, Lee gets up, walks down to Bannister's place, walks over here, goes over to the post office because they know Judy's been going to the post office every morning, and he waits to intercept her, okay? Which he does, and we wind up looking at the first few days, Lee's first days in NOLA. All right, so on the 26th, he meets Judy, who's Judyth Vary at the time. Then the next day, he introduces Judy to David Ferrie, Dr. David Ferrie, okay? The following day, there's a party at David Ferrie's house where Mary Sherman appears. And Judy said that, I was told that's Mary Sherman. And she goes and takes something out of the refrigerator and leaves. And then Judy's saying, well, I'm hearing a lot of strange stuff with this party. I mean, these people talk about rigging elections and all this stuff. I'd like to know if this is really a US government operation that I can participate in, because if it's not, I'm out, okay? And Lee says, all right, well, let's take you down to see Guy Bannister. All right, so on the 29th, Judy goes down dressed up as Marina Oswald and enters Guy Bannister's office, and he's there with all these FBI plaques on the wall and all that stuff, and he says, yes, Lee's working on a Get Castro project with us. All right, so it's Dr. Alton Ochsner Sr., who is the one who has invited Judy to New Orleans. Why? Because he knows all about her medical training. He knows what she's capable of. He knows the research she's done, right? So Dr. Oschner's invitation to Judy is a strong one. It says, Judy, you're a sophomore in college. How'd you like to skip the last 2 years of college and start Tulane Medical School in the fall? We'll get you in the early admissions program, and we will, give you a stipend and give you a place to live and all that stuff. And you can be working with Mary Sherman, a great cancer researcher. All you need to do is come spend the summer in New Orleans. So what happens is Alton suddenly says, so I'll see you the second week of May, and hangs up. Well, it's May 8th when Judy finally meets Oschner. As she just said, the doctors were out of town. Mary and Alton were both out of town when she arrived. Okay, but May 8th is the first day of the second week of May. But it is Lee Oswald who sets up the meeting between JVB and Dr. O. All right, but Oswald goes in first. Now, why is that? I don't think Oswald ever met Oschner before that. He's got to go in and prove he's who he says he is. And that's called bona fides in the business, okay? So he goes in and proves his bona fides, and then they bring Judy in, all right? And they talk about what's going to be going on in New Orleans that summer. Now, just a footnote here, Judy gets married on May 1st, I think, maybe May 2nd, it's close to there. So she legally changes from Judyth Vary to Judy Ann Baker at the time, which you'll see on other documents later on. All right, so second week of May, May 10th, Lee and Judy start working their cover jobs at the William Riley Coffee Company on the same day. Actually, technically, they start at the Standard Coffee Company, which is a retail sales subsidiary run by a Riley executive VP by the name of William Moynihan, who just happens to be an ex-FBI agent and a member of Alton Ochsner's political organization called INCA. That's an anti-communist organization, all right? So why is that? That's because Moynihan gets to control the background checks. So no Russia in Lee's background check, and no cancer in Judy's background check. Those are the two words they need to keep out of the conversation. And then Lee was transferred from Standard Coffee to the William B. Riley Coffee Company 1 week later. Why? Because if you're transferred between units, you don't have to get another background check. So Moynihan already has the background on Lee where he wants it, and he transfers him over there. Judy stays in Standard as the secretary for Moynihan. All right, so we're looking at the Riley Coffee Company time period, and Lee and Judy begin their work on the secret cancer project while they are on the clock at Riley. So what's going on here? You got a mouse house on Louisiana Avenue Parkway. I'll show you in a minute. And they take the mice from the mouse house over to Ferrie's apartment, where Judy and Lee do their experiments. What they do is they kill the mice and cut out the tumors and grind them up in a blender and make test tubes and slides and stuff. And Judy takes those usually by bus, lunchbox over to Dr. Mary's place on St. Charles. I'll show you that in a minute. And then Dr. Mary takes it back for more radiation. And then they take the mice back to the mouse house and let them grow their tumors. And what they're doing is using more and more radiation to get bigger and bigger tumors because they want a more and more aggressive cancer so that they can kill Castro. Okay, that's the rationale that's being presented. All right, here is Louisiana Avenue Parkway. That's Ferrie's house at 3330, and that's the mouse house at 3225. Now, just a footnote on my personal connection to all this second floor here was where my girlfriend lived. So I was in and out of this particular house a lot. Downstairs is where the crazy old lady lived. Upstairs were where Carlos and Miguel lived, the Cuban guys that were running the mice from the lab over to there. The lab was there before my girlfriend lived in it. I mean, the place was thoroughly reconditioned. The floors were sanded and varnished. The walls were all repainted and stuff. Any rate, so this is what uptown New Orleans looks like at the time. All right, you got Lee Oswald's apartment and you got Judy's apartment. There is the Magazine Street bus, which if you go a little bit to the right of what we're showing you here on the map, takes you directly to the front or back door of the Riley Coffee Company. So Lee got on the bus practically every morning, not every morning, but practically, and they stopped and picked up Judy and they rode together. Now, if you were investigating Lee Oswald activity in the summer of 1963, you would have figured out he worked at Riley and he didn't have a car, therefore he must have taken the bus, and you would have interviewed the bus driver who would have said, yeah, they got this nice looking young woman. She gets on about, Marengo Street, and they sit together in the back. The white people sit in the back of the bus. That's an interesting note. All right. And bus drivers remember things like that, but I saw no evidence that anybody did that. Okay. Then you got Mary Sherman's apartment up here on St. Charles and David Ferrie's apartment up here. All right. You got the Louisiana Avenue bus that goes between the two. Judy would get on this bus and bring the stuff from David Ferrie's apartment to Mary Sherman's apartment, where she had a key and she would let herself in, and sometimes she'd read and then go back to work and clock out. The linear particle accelerator is right here on Tchoupitoulas and Calhoun. All right, that's the U.S. Public Health Service hospital. You notice it's on the riverfront here, so they can bring up ships and offload wounded soldiers during World War I, which is when they built it. And then conveniently located down the street here is Dr. Alton Ochsner Sr.'s house on Audubon Park. All right, so that's his Loyola University here, which comes into play, and Tulane University here comes into play. But this is uptown New Orleans. It is thick with this activity in 1963. All right, here is a document that shows that Judy worked at Riley's with Lee during that summer. All right, her name is Judyth Baker. As I showed you earlier, she just got married, so her name changed. They kept the word Vary out of the conversation. And I've checked out all these numbers. They match exactly with the time and amount of time she said she worked there. All right, here are Lee's time cards. All right, and what you got here is that's Lee, and that's Judy's signature. And that 40 means he worked 40 hours this week, right? Judy's approving Lee's time cards. Normally, Moynihan does that. But when Moynihan's not there, Judy approves it because she is his secretary and she's got the power to do that. Then we get to what I call Lee's trip to hell. It's a very intense 2-week period. Now, on July 19th, you see down here, he gets fired from the Riley Coffee Company. And a couple of days later, Dr. Oschner tells Judy that Lee's going to be on TV. What's he talking about? He's talking about this right here in the middle of August. Well, the next day, Judy goes over to Ferrie's house and sees Lee editing a training film. And Lee says, you know, hey, honey, let me kiss you on the cheek. I gotta go to the airport. All right. Well, where's he going? He's going to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. For those who don't know what Oak Ridge, Tennessee is, it is the sister laboratory to Los Alamos and Sandia out in New Mexico. All right. It's the laboratory which is working on hydrogen weapons. All right. So they have lots of radioactive stuff there. Then Dutz Barrett drives Lee from New Orleans to Mobile, where Lee speaks to the Jesuits about the USSR. What is going on here? Who's Dutz Barrett? Why is Lee Oswald, the oiler at the Riley Coffee Company, speaking to the Jesuits? All right. Now that's where we get into Dutz Barrett is a lifelong friend of Carlos Marcello's. All right. He's the mafia boss in New Orleans, if you don't know. Dutz is a high-ranking mafia associate. He handles the cash for Marcello's operations. Well, he's married to Lillian Moret, his wife, who happens to be the sister of Lee Oswald's mother, Marguerite. And Lee lived with Uncle Dutz and Aunt Lillian as a child, where he became close to their son, John Moret, who happens to be studying to be a Jesuit priest in Mobile at the Jesuit seminary there, and he helped produce the seminar on life in the USSR. Okay, now Lee gets invited to this particular seminar by Paul Piazza, who happened to be my 10th grade English teacher. All right, so again, I find myself in the middle of a lot of the story. Then, after the speech, Lee gets driven back to New Orleans. The next day, he calls Judy in a panic and says, I've got to talk to you. Judy says, it's Monday. We don't talk on Mondays. He said, no, I got to talk to you. Let's go to Katzenbach's or whatever it was. And the point here is that Lee tells her about the JFK assassination plot, and Lee says, they've asked me to do all this stuff in August. I think make me look like a communist. They're telling me it's so I can get into Cuba and deliver the weapon, but I am not sure about that. I think they're asking questions here. I mean, they're doing things here that's going to make me look like a communist. Maybe they're setting me up to take the blame for Kennedy's assassination. Now, check the date. It is July 29th. August 20th, October 29th, November 20th. This is nearly 3 months before the assassination. Lee knows it's going to happen, and he sees that he's being manipulated into it. Then, the next day, there are these raids at the training camp in Lacombe, which is the northeast corner of Lake Pontchartrain. Right, and Lee's concerned that he's going to get pegged as the leak on this, and he's very concerned about these angry, rough Cubans who run around beating people to a pulp, and he doesn't want to get caught in that. All right, and then on August 1st, the New Orleans media reports the raid on this camp. Okay, we'll come back to this in a little bit. Then I want to go into this Atomic Energy Museum thing. I mean, one day he's in New Orleans, the next day he's back, 2 days later, he's back in New Orleans to be driven to Mobile. What is going on here? Well, New Orleans is 600 miles from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, outside of Knoxville. Again, that's a national laboratory involved in radiation research, okay? It's 9.5 hours one way by car on the interstates today. Back then, in '63, you couldn't possibly get there and back in a car in a 30-hour window, all right? But if you got one of these, which is a twin engine plane with a 1,000-mile radius that flies at 200 miles an hour, you can, all right? So what we see here is that this is the date, July 26th. There's Lee H. Oswald. There is the USSR. Pay attention, FBI. I am trying to send you a message. Dallas Road, Dallas Road, Dallas, Texas. The road is going to Dallas, Texas. At the time, Lee lives on 4905 Magazine Street in New Orleans, Louisiana. So he's trying to send somebody a message that says, this is what's happening. So the next thing that happens is, you know, as Judy just explained to you about biting her lip and stuff. I mean, on July 29th, he tells her about the JFK assassination plot and that he thinks he's being set up as the patsy in all this stuff in August. Okay, so in August, Lee is painted red, all right? There are these activities that happen where there is no other conclusion other than the fact that he's a communist agitator. Now, why are they doing that again? They tell him it's to get you into Cuba, but he is unsure about that. All right, so on the 16th of August, WDSU TV films Lee, et cetera, outside the International Trademark. WDSU TV, by the way, is run by Edgar Stearns, who's a member of Alton Ochsner's Inca, all right? And there, Lee hands out the famous Hands Off Cuba flyers. Now, then Chauncey Holt speaks up. Chauncey's a very complex and interesting guy. He was a professional criminal and artist. He had deep personal relationships with Meyer Lansky, who owned the casinos in Havana, and with Peter Licavoli, who ran the mob in Detroit. All right. Then comes Operation Mongoose, where the CIA starts a CIA mafia kill squad, right? And Chauncey's the mob's delegate on that. They're going to make weapons for anti-Castro Cubans. What do I mean by weapons? Things like silenced machine guns, all right? Chauncey's in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. What's he doing there? Well, first of all, he drove Chuck Nicoletti, who's a notorious assassin, out of Chicago, working for the Chicago mob, and Leo Lips Messeri, who's another assassin. He drove them from Licavoli's ranch in Arizona to Dallas. Why is Chauncey going to Dallas? Because he made the fake Secret Service IDs that the guys on the grassy knoll were using. And he delivered the IDs to Daley Plaza that morning. But we find Chauncey 4 months earlier in New Orleans because he's there to deliver weapons to Guy Bannister, who he calls the weapons distributor. And he made the fake IDs for Lee Oswald, right? The Lee Heidel and that kind of stuff, right? But he's caught in a photo with Lee in front of the ITM on August 16th. This is Chauncey in the red box, all right? There's Lee right there. So what's Chauncey doing in the photo? He just got finished a meeting with Lloyd Cobb. That's Clay Shaw's boss, right? He's the director of the International Trademark. So what do we have here? We have Meyer Lansky's accountant, pilot, bodyguard, and assassin coming out of a meeting with Clay Shaw's boss. And where's he going? He's going to lunch with Guy Bannister, the weapons distributor, to talk about delivering the weapons. After the WDSU TV thing, Lee appears on WDSU radio. Here is the record album that somebody at I think Jeffrey Holmes is going to be talking about at your meeting. But this album was produced by Dr. Alton Ochsner's political organization, Inca, right? And his picture's on the back with some other people. So, Mongoose, Operation Mongoose, Chauncey's part of it, brings the weapons to New Orleans 2 weeks after the FBI raid on the camp. So what's going on here? The raid cleaned out all the obsolete old weapons, and the new CIA weapons are being brought in at that time for distribution to the, excuse me, I don't have a cough button here. Now, here in the photo, you see Lee in the circle and Raphael in the square. That's Raphael Cruz. He's the father of U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. And note that Raphael stands behind Lee. You know, he speaks Spanish. He's a street fighter from Cuba, but he does not hand out any fair play for Cuba leaflets. He's just there to protect Lee. All right, here are 4 photos of Raphael from over the decades. This one's a mugshot. That one's, he's a teenager. In August, this is him in front of the ATM, and number 4 is him in 2015. Okay, back at Ferrie's lab, what do we have? We've got Dr. Oschner orders Judyth to kill the mice, starting with 50 per day, increasing it to 500 per day. Guys, I'm getting a funny sound on the soundtrack. Are you okay?
We're good.
Okay. So Lee helps Judyth kill the mice. Carlos and Miguel, who live upstairs in the mouse house, are helping dispose of the mice. Lee and Juan Valdez begin disposing of all the cancerous material in Mary Sherman's apartment. Throughout August, Lee was helping Juan Valdez, who's a resident in the apartment complex, flush the toilet 30 times in a row, night after night, for a month. How do we know this? Because Victoria Hawes was a neighbor of Mary Sherman and Juan Valdez's. In fact, the wall of her bedroom was up against the bathroom where they were doing the flushing. And she also happened to have gone to school with Lee Oswald in middle school. So she would see Lee coming and going out of Juan Valdez's apartment. And Juan Valdez is a very mysterious guy. Again, I've got hours of video on all this, but this is a top line presentation. It is the time for the project to test the weapons on humans. So where do you find humans you can kill that nobody will miss? On death row at Angola prison, just down the road from Jackson, Louisiana. That's where you find them. Look at this map. All right, here is New Orleans down here on the right. It's a long ways up there to Angola. There's the Angola prison. You take this road up here so you don't have to go through Baton Rouge. You kind of go in the back door here and you stop at Clinton. Now, why would you stop at Clinton? Well, Clinton is the county seat, or the parish seat, as they call it in Louisiana. And they have lots of black Cadillacs and stuff coming and going. They got judges and lawyers, everybody coming up to the courthouse. They also have a payphone sitting out outside. So if they don't want to stop in Jackson and wait there, because, you know, it's a very small town, they would look obvious waiting for something. So they stay in Clinton. And what they want, what they got here, the phone call comes in from Angola to Clinton, maybe bounces in New Orleans, who knows. And then they both leave and they rendezvous in Jackson with a white van that has the prisoners in them. Now, what are they about to do? Well, it's a hot August afternoon, you know. What they're expecting in Clinton, this is just the plan, right? The plan. And it's a hot August afternoon. They're expecting an empty square in front of the courthouse. And they're going to test the cancerous bioweapon on the humans in August 29th. All right. Prisoners over there, they're going to rendezvous, take the prisoners in, inject the prisoners. But they kind of forgot to read the newspapers. On August 28th, Martin Luther King gives his I Have a Dream speech, which was a major event in the civil rights movement that summer. And he's running the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is working with the CORE, the Congress on Racial Equality, who has been setting up voter registration drives all across the South. So Martin Luther King's speech gets broadcast on all these black radio stations, and the churches are behind them, and they get all the blacks out to go to the voter registration thing at the proper time and proper place. And so you got this situation going on in Clinton that day where you got all these, it's kind of a Klan town. So you got all these angry whites on one side of the square, and you got all these blacks waiting in line to register to vote on the other side. And in the middle, you got this guy whose name is John Manchester. He's the town marshal, okay? And he doesn't want any trouble. There's been trouble in Louisiana town. So what you got here, into the scene drives a black Cadillac. And Manchester says, who are these guys? Feds, media, outside agitators? So Manchester goes over to the black Cadillac, pulls his badge and says, may I see your ID? And this guy says, yes, I'm Clay Shaw of the International Trademark. Well, second guy wasn't hard to recognize with his orange wig and stuff. And the third guy gets out of the back of the car and goes over and gets in line with the blacks. And he tries to register to vote because he's white. And they're wondering if they'll let him to register to vote, but he doesn't even live in the area, you know? So when they see his ID, they say, get out of here. You know, what are you doing? Troublemaker, you know? So that's what's happening there. And then, how do we know this? Was Manchester testified to the United States Congress during the HSCA, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And he told them the story I just told you. All right. And that was not released for 16 years. The Congress of the United States held the fact that Clay Shaw, who Garrison had gone after, was associated with Lee Harvey Oswald, secret, and kept it from the American public. Thank you, Congress. Then the phone rings and they leave to go find the white van in Jackson. Why in Jackson? Well, the East Louisiana State Hospital, which is basically a mental hospital for the criminally insane, is there, which is the place they've selected to do their experiments. And the question after, you know, they inject the guy and they drive home, but the question is, did the bioweapon work? Did the cancer kick in? Well, 2 days later, Lee drives Judy to Jackson. Why Judy? Because Judy is the one that knows about all these special tests, the blood titration test that she just told you about, that she learned in Dr. Moore's laboratory up in Buffalo. All right. So they go up there, she's dressed like a nurse, everything else. They pick up a employee from the thing, get them through the security, and Judy goes in and does the test, right? Well, Judy finds out that these guys are really sick with cancer, right? I mean, she's got the evidence now, but she's concerned. I mean, she did not come to New Orleans to kill people. She came to New Orleans to try to find a cure for cancer. So she writes a note to Oschner that ends her career, basically. But Lee drives Judy to Jackson in this green Kaiser on, check the date here, August 31st. And this car is seen up there by the barber and some other people. Okay, August 31st, remember that date I just pointed out? Mary Sherman's apartment is burglarized. There's the burglary report from the New Orleans Police Department. Dr. Mary Sherman, her address on St. Charles Avenue at 11 p.m. on August 31st. Was anyone there? No. Why not? Because Dr. Mary had left for London for a month that morning and filed the report on that date when she returned. All right. So is this a coincidence? I don't think so. This is my timeline for what happened there. 9 o'clock in the morning, Lee drives Mary to the airport. Mary flies to London for a month. Oh, by the way, right outside of London in Oxford, there's a linear particle accelerator with a platinum pyramid that looks just like the one she was working on. That's why she's there for a month. Think about that one. Okay, 10 a.m. Lee returns from the airport, picks up the Kaiser automobile for the trip to Jackson. At 11 a.m., he picks up Judy and they leave for Jackson. That's a 4-hour trip. So they get there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They got about 3 hours of business to do there. And they do the blood test. Lee leaves some breadcrumb trails at the barber shop and goes to see Reeves Morgan that Judy just told you about. And then at 10 o'clock at night, it's another 4 hours, they're back in New Orleans. It's at 11 o'clock that same night that Mary Sherman's apartment is burglarized. And a heavy Latino man is seen in the courtyard. And all the medical evidence is stolen, is removed. Therefore, there's no way to connect Mary to this project anymore because they've taken the evidence. Good work, guys. All right, so then you got Lee's silent September. He sits around on the porch and reads his books. Judy leaves on the September 3rd. Lee reads on the front porch in shorts and sandals. There are no media appearances, no political actions, no leafleting, no tryst with Judyth. Just waiting for what? The prisoner to die in the Jackson hospital so he can take the bioweapon to Mexico. Here is the place. This behind this tree is 4905. That's 4907. That's 4909. And there's the porch where he was sitting on reading. Okay, on September 25th, Lee goes from New Orleans to Mexico City, where he goes through a bullfight. Now, the Warren Commission version of this trip is interesting because they say on September 25th, 26th, he goes there, all right, from New Orleans to Houston to Laredo, but they have a problem. The FBI admits this is a problem. They can't find anyone who sees Lee on the bus between New Orleans and Houston. They literally say we can only presume he was on the bus because there was no other way to get there. But at the end of the day, September 25th, Lee calls Judy from Houston. Judy's in Florida, but he calls her from Houston, all right? And he said, I had an interesting day. This morning, I was driven down to Houma, Louisiana, where there's an airport, a blimp base, the Houma blimp base is what it's called. Well, Hugh Ward, who is Guy Bannister's partner, drives Lee down there and flies this airplane, it's a Havilland Dove, to Austin, where he goes to the governor's office, by the way. There are 2 witnesses who see him in Austin. Then he goes to Dallas to check on his family, and there's a witness, Sylvia Odio, who sees him there. Then he goes down to Houston and lands at the Sugar Land Airport. For those who don't know anything about Texas, that's the Bircher capital, okay? Then he, after calling Judyth, gets on the bus and continues down to Mexico City, which Judy will tell you about later, or somebody will tell you about later. I saw it on the schedule, which deserves attention. So that is Lee's summer of secrets. My interpretation of it, at any rate. I hope the timeline is helpful for you to get your head around the fairly complex situation that happened there. And now I want to show you quickly the crime scene photos of Mary Sherman, all right? And which has been the focus of my inquiry all along. And this is the only crime scene photo published in the newspaper. These 2 guys, that's Frank Hayward and this is Robert Townsend, are there examining the crime scene. Now, look at the crime scene for a moment. Did these curtains burn? No. Did these books burn? No. Did this carpet burn? No. Did that chair burn? No. So where is the heat that did this damage to Mary Sherman's body. Now, this is an interesting photo because you see her feet are fine. There's hair on her head and hair on her pelvis, but in between, there is the total destruction of skin and bones. You can see her internal organs. How does that happen? I mean, normally with an electrocution, the electricity goes down to the feet and blows off the feet. But Mary is standing in the laboratory with the linear particle accelerator in front of a steel wall that is grounded to the ground. So the electricity, she grabs something with her right hand. The electricity comes down her arm and out her back into the wall and disintegrates everything in its path. There's really no blood. Everything's cauterized from the beginning. And here's the photo that I really want you to burn into your memory. You see her hair here? Have you ever burned hair around a stove? You know, it's the easiest thing on the body to burn. So how do you get thousands of degrees of temperature to disintegrate an arm and not burn the hair next to it? As far as I'm concerned, the only possible explanation for that is electricity. And so that's what happens to Mary Sherman. But I have some new information for you. This year, 2021, a guy by the name of Gene Fields published a book called Cops and Characters in the Big Easy. Well, who is Gene Fields? Dan Storper brought this to me, by the way. I should give him a plug for that. He was an NOPD homicide detective. And pages 110 through 119, so it's approximately 10 pages, are about the Mary Sherman murder. And Fields worked with the NOPD detective Frank Hayward, who was in the room examining the thing. And Frank told him that the FBI was waiting in the NOPD homicides chief's office for Hayward and his partner the day after the Mary Sherman murder. And what did the FBI have to say? Do not discuss this case with anyone because Mary Sherman was working on a top secret project for the US government. Now you want to get into forensic theory for a second? How do you investigate a crime when the federal government's telling you not to investigate it? There's a logical flaw there. Anywho, that's what I have to say about that. Time for questions and answers. You guys still with it? I can't hear you.
We got your back.
Good.
Any other questions?
Where did he get that card from?
Please repeat the question.
Where did he get the car from that he drove on August 31st?
That car was being used by the project, by the CIA, if you will. And it was usually a drop car. It was parked outside of a medical supply office on a regular basis so somebody could pick up stuff from the medical supply, put it in the back of the car, and then somebody else could walk up to the car and drive it off. So it was sort of a car that was in use for the project, if you will. And it was just, Lee had access to it because it was part of what Bannister was doing and was part of the project. So it was a project car, and he knew it was an old car, and he went through all the lengths of having extra water and It actually had a problem with the tube during the car, and Judy had to take off her nylon stockings and fix the tube during the trip. But that's where he got the car.
Anything else? Ed, can you hear me? Please?
I'm not hearing anything.
Judith thinks she can add a little bit to that.
I'm sure she can.
She can do it here or up there. Right here. Shanna. Just talk right here.
While they're getting ready for that, I'll say that Lee knew how to drive very well. I think Judith chronicled 24 witnesses who saw him drive.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ed Haslam.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.